This dates back to when Casey Rodamore put out the Ordinals client and said, hey, I've got this fun little project called Ordinals, and that kicked off them obsessing over child pornography. Who the fuck's problem is it that we talk about this? Matthew Cratter and Luke and Mechanic and their ilk thrust it into the forefront of the conversation. People call this bullshit thinking adversarially. This is thinking fucking cucked. And then, after Luke denied that he was working on a fork for a long time, calling everybody liars, turns out he was liar, and that brings us to the 110 client. Totally fucking incoherent. Bitcoin it should be designed to be neutral to state law or moral law, and this is the entire fucking point of Bitcoin.
He has other motives too. So we recently spoke, Hunter and I. We recorded like a 2-hour episode. And of course, he's on the BIP-110 side. So he was giving me arguments for BIP-110. And I asked him if he could connect me to someone who could give me arguments on the core side, someone that he respects, someone that he feels is rational. And then he connected me with you. So I'm looking forward to like hashing into all of that with you. But before that, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, sure. I'm Charlie Spears, longtime Bitcoiner, spent half a decade mining, did the kind of pioneered the off-grid Bitcoin mining stuff almost a decade ago now. Was looking for a way to get out of this because mining is a very, very debilitating, exhausting process. And through a series of funny events, found myself hanging out with Casey on Discord as he launched Ordinals, which then was way more fun and interesting. Really thrust me into the technical side of Bitcoin. Spent about a year working for Luxor on the pool side, trying to do some stuff, but then decided to do a different thing, which is start a originally Bitcoin industry media company called Blockspace. And now, because the market has completely evolved, we basically cover data centers and powered land, most of which is AI related. So for a while there, was really into the technical side of Bitcoin, kind of the crossover, I'm not a developer, into crossing and explaining what's going on in the world of Bitcoin technical discourse. But now, since that is incredibly painful and debilitating to even look at, and the market is totally non-existent, now I talk about AI. So that's what I do. But now I, like everyone, you're in an industry long enough, and eventually you don't actually do anything. You're just a podcaster. So that's I like to joke that you do real work for a while, and then you kind of ascend to just talking about it. So
yeah, I didn't even do the real work. I just like jumped right into podcasting.
Skate into where the puck goes. Yeah.
Okay, so can you provide a very quick summary of the whole spam saga that led to BIP-110?
So when Casey Rodamore put out the Ordinals client and said, hey, I've got this fun little project called Ordinals. You can track Satoshis, we can number and identify Satoshis, and you can put arbitrary data. And a lot of the primary use of that in his original idea was like art, a personal art project. And because this in January and February of 2023 exploded, got really popular, I think it was a bit of chance. It caused a big hullabaloo on the mailing list and in the Bitcoin, like hardcore Bitcoin ecosystem, which was kind of coming off a 3 or 4 year god tier run of like podcasting, a bunch of people like codifying, what Bitcoin is into this new mythos of like hard money. And so Bitcoin was like at its, the toxic Bitcoin maximalist or the neo maximalist, like post 2018, post 2019. Had kind of been like kind of interwoven a bunch of extra cultural stuff, such as like COVID and vaccines and meat and masculinity into the discussion. So everything was primed. And people got really angry that this was happening because for many, many years, Bitcoiners had said Bitcoin cannot do these things. Bitcoin cannot put NFTs on Bitcoin. And so we've kind of retconned this idea that Bitcoin shall not have these things. And so when this view was invalidated, it, instead of causing people to reflect on their biases about what Bitcoin the network is, it caused them to react viscerally and try to oppose this and say, this does not work with my worldview, therefore I shall oppose it. In the developer side, there was a flurry on the mailing list. And I think Andrew Polstra put it best, the last week of January 2023 in his post on, like, unfortunately, we can't do anything to stop this. And we can't ban useless data. There's like a meaningless argument for any kind of like repricing of it. And they can embed it into dummy signatures anyway. So anyway, I had hemmed and hawed about this because I kind of accidentally found myself as a bit of like the mouthpiece for like Casey for a little while. That's a whole nother story. And then that spring was the spring of the Ordislow client, where people were trying to delay the propagation of inscriptions. It was a completely delusional, completely retarded attempt. A lot of the folks who are now like anti-110 were leaders of this. But it was like a very incoherent way of trying to delay spam.
And you're not talking about knots here.
No, I'm talking about the Ordislow client, which was like kind of a precursor to what Knots tried to do. And then there was not really an adoption of Knots at the time, outside of Luke and his like weird side minions. But then the spam debate kind of dies down. There's some like meme coins on Bitcoin. That's the rise of the BRC20 tokens. It caused these fee spikes. You cause a lot of really interesting like preferential peering for nodes and a lot of different types of transaction inclusion by pools. You have the rise of Slipstream as Portland Hodl goes over to work on that. And like relaxing of standardness rules over 23 and 24. You have Ocean launch at the end of 23. You have Luke and Mechanic and some others shortly after the Ocean launch, like kind of co-opt the purpose of Ocean to be an independent block producer, to being about spam. So that was kind of a weird pivot. I feel that company's still dealing with. And so 24, not as much. If I recall, it blends together. 24, there's some debate. Then in 25, we were on our second technical conference, Op Next. This is at the MicroStrategy HQ, and what happened was I had been part of my view of this conference was that a lot of the insular Bitcoin Core developers were kind of like in their, I'm going to say the term, ivory tower, and have this kind of like technocratic, like this insular technocratic culture. It's not bad, but it's like this. It's not a very they're not very progressive as far as like trying to move Bitcoin forward, and I think they're kind of in denial about this. So we've been organizing this comparatively technical progressive conference, and one of the things was I knew that a lot of the core devs were not following specifically how Satreya were posting their data to Bitcoin, and posting their like roll-up data. And so we had one of the co-founders of Satreya demonstrate their like roll-up mechanism. And what happened was that kicked off on the mailing list a discussion in spring of 25, I believe April of 25, this mailing list post by Antoine Ponceau, who was like, they're embedding their roll-up data in like unspinnable outputs. This is bad. Let's see if we can tweak, a little like relay policy to avoid this type of thing happening again. Because we know other companies are going to try to build on stuff like this. And then that begins the modern present day filter debate, where It caused the entire crash out on the pull request for this. It gave rise to the reactionary knots adoption. It really put Luke and Mechanic and then around that time some other like talking head folks like Matthew Cratter type who like really made it their brand to say, this this relay policy change is the line in the sand. Totally fucking incoherent, very, very clueless as to how all this works. And that kicked off them obsessing over child pornography and nation state attacks. And then that's like, and I think a lot of people who started paying attention around then, because it got magnified a lot, that's when the Knots 110 movement popped up on the radar. Around October, they finally fucking realized they had to fork. This is something that like was very obvious to us, and we had talked about with Luke and Mechanic and everybody involved for fucking years. Them saying, no, we can do this with relay policy from a minority amount of clients. Totally fucking incoherent. And then after Luke denied that he was working on a fork for a long time, calling everybody liars, turns out he was. GitHub commits prove that he was actually working on it while publicly denying that he was. Liar. And that brings us to the 110 client, formerly called 1444. They had like some kind of emergency like trigger that they wanted to activate in like last October, November. I forget. They had a planned fork date like early February of this year, and now they're actually gonna fucking do it in like 9 days. So good riddance. Please leave. I know you can't, and you can come back to Bitcoin, but you have to take a shower, a Tapper Wizard shower, to wash yourself clean of the sins you committed. So, yeah, that's not a short version, but that's like a really long version of like. I think a lot of people like don't remember these things because these were major arguments, and this is one of the reasons why I'm kind of like fatigued talking about this because we argued about this in 23 2 or 3 times. We argued about this in 24. We argued about this a year and a half ago, and like now all of a sudden all the Bitcoin influencers like, well, I gotta explain what's going on, and I'm like, what? Where the fuck were you guys for the past 3.5 years? This shit has already been like abundantly clear, and yeah. So okay, I'm done ranting.
Whether or not anyone agrees with what you say, they have to admit that it's very entertaining the way you say it.
Thank you.
This episode is powered by Bitshala. A lot of people discover Bitcoin and then ask, what's next? If you're a developer in India, Bitshala is the answer to that question. Bitshala is a grassroots education initiative run by Indian Bitcoiners to help developers learn Bitcoin the right way. Bitshala offers a paid fellowship to selected participants to work closely with experienced mentors, contribute to real-world open source projects, and build credibility within the Bitcoin ecosystem. If that sounds interesting to you, check out the link in the description. People keep asking me where to buy Bitcoin safely in India. I use GetBit for all my Bitcoin purchases. It's the one I recommend to friends and family as well. GetBit is India's first Bitcoin-only exchange. No distractions, no casino coins, only Bitcoin. You can set up a Bitcoin SIP with GetBit starting at just ₹100, which makes stacking sats really easy. And whenever you're ready, you can withdraw your Bitcoin to your own private wallet for free, so you don't ever have to worry about a hack. If you want to check it out, you can use my code DVJBTC for 30% off on platform fees for the first 3 months. The link is in the description.
Yeah.
So you've called the BIP-110 folks incoherent.
Yeah.
That they're somehow missing something about how things work. Why did you do that?
Good question. Are you familiar with the idiom, you can lead a horse to water, but you cannot make them drink? We have a lot of this example in the 110 story. The first of which is this concept that relay policy is ineffective in the face of economic demand for transactions. The second one of which, so it took years to like demonstrate this empirically. Because because we could not argue this. It had to be demonstrated. The other one of which is one of the core concepts of 110 is that you want to impose friction towards transactions you don't like. And the other one is that we break up the transactions into non-contiguous like data pushes. And I think this core point of how 110 is constructed is unbelievably incoherent. So you're saying that if you can have the same files, the same horrific type of content, you say, and if you just split them up into smaller pieces, then that's somehow okay? Because the entire framing is that we need to insulate this, we need to protect so that the government or say like the Jews can't like sabotage Bitcoin and like haul off node runners and put them in jail for storing or like having like bad information. And somehow the authorities, the state, the deep state, Israel, Mossad is somehow going to have discretion and come look and see you running your node, and you're like, oh, you actually have those data pushes broken up by small bytes or non-contiguous. You're free to go. Totally fucking incoherent. This idea of imposing extra cost to spam, look at how much time and agony and blood, sweat, and tears and useless British sultry toned podcast Mechanic has gone on to just soliloquy to an empty, sallow faced audience, and he just the full effect of this is that we have no functional additional cost to putting JPEGs on Bitcoin. In fact, if you haven't been paying attention, there are cheaper ways to do it in 110 that are being demonstrated right now by an anonymous account. So you can ambitiously impose a 1 to 2% maybe cost of the conventional way of putting JPEGs or any kind of arbitrary on Bitcoin after 3 years of agony and splitting the community and injecting CSAM into like codifying CSAM into the discussion. And all the best you can do is impose like a 1 to 2% cost onto putting a JPEG on a Bitcoin. If I were to go back to the pollster post from the mailing list in January of 23, he specifically actually uses, even if we, quote, if we were to incur, say, a 2x cost to them, but if this 2x is enough to disincentivize storage, then there's no need to have this discussion because they will be forced to stop due to fee market competition. Anyway, this is assuming that actual transaction activity increases on Bitcoin and pricing of block space increases, in which case all of these spam problems are solved. He then also goes on to say very clearly, and if there's little demand for Bitcoin block space, so what's the problem with paying miners to fill it with data that validators don't even need to perform real computation on? One of the other arguments of the knots and 110 camp is that it's filling their node. It's making it hard to run a node. How do you reconcile this with the fact that this is data you don't have to validate? So so in a scenario where we have 4 megabyte full blocks full of inscriptions, 4 megabyte blocks full of like normal, standard, explicitly monetary transactions, it is actually harder for a node to validate the monetary transactions than it is for them to validate the witness data. So if your argument is that you're trying to help node runners because it's becoming difficult to run a node because they have to validate all these big ass blocks, then you should be pro inscriptions because they require less computation on your poor little fucking ass Raspberry Pi 3 bullshit type shit. Like, you should want to eliminate monetary transactions if that is your goal. However, their goal is none of those things. It is moral purity. Their goal is to instill and institute an arbitrary moving target of moral purity based upon an unclear heuristic of what is spam. And so that's why they're incoherent. They just won't say that. Now, sometimes they're coming out and saying it like it. Honestly, kind of beat them over the head about this. Be like to basically have them say it's not about these things. It's not about imposing cost of spam. It's about sending a message and about reclaiming Bitcoin's purity and its pristine nature from the before times back in 2022 and 21 at the peak of Bitcoin maximalist narrative. However, those days are gone. You have ceded ground to the big corporations. You've ceded ground to BlackRock. You've lost. The big corporations and the state is they are the drivers of Bitcoin adoption now, because you have like a moth to the flame flown and focused on an irrelevant thing, which is anti-cypherpunk, anti-freedom, and extremely anti-Bitcoin. So that's why they're incoherent. Yeah.
So a few things here that I would like to sort of double click on. I agree that relay policies are ineffective if there is economic demand for certain kinds of transactions to be put on the blockchain. That is perfectly fine. But when it comes to breaking up transactions or having to breaking up a JPEG, let's say, to have it on the blockchain versus having the option of putting a JPEG as it is on the blockchain, does it not make a legal difference? Like when it comes to defensibility, for instance, let's say I'm using X to post something. Now I can post zeros and ones on X. Being able to post a picture of, let's say, child pornography through my account on X versus posting the zeros and ones broken down into several chunks over many posts, there is a difference when X allows A versus X allows B.
Yeah. You're still posting zeros and ones on X, though. You still have to use a software to transform that data into one which is able to visualize the zeros and ones. You are removing a couple steps. You still have to have some kind of software which puts all this data together and visualizes it. I also think that's one of the most anti-Bitcoin stances imaginable, because why the fuck do you fucking care what the law is? Like, Bitcoin should be designed to not care what the law of a state is. People call this bullshit thinking adversarially. This is thinking fucking cucked. You are fucking cuck if you think this. I do not pull punches here. The Bitcoin it should be designed to be neutral to state law or moral law. It should be a neutral network which treats transactions indiscriminate to their content. And this is the entire fucking point of Bitcoin. This is what keeps it a free and open network. If you do not believe this, you are anti-freedom and anti-Bitcoin. So trying to say that we should be adherent to the predominant moral code of most of these states in the world is the exact type of thing Satoshi wanted to avoid. Because now you're basically subservient to, and they only use child porn because that's such an objectionable thing, which is universally hated by most people. But this applies to all sorts of content, because once you open the door for discretion on any type of content, even the most objectionable, horrific thing, now what if you don't like Xi Jinping? What if you don't like Donald Trump? What if you don't like the next progressive president of the United States? What if you post something wrong in the UK? Because now you have to basically anchor the morality of the content into some exogenous source, and that exogenous source is the vibes of what most people around you think are right and wrong, or what the state defines in law. So this idea that we need to be adherent to what the state defines as legal and illegal is a fucking cucked position. And this idea that you are that's functionally different to post zeros and ones, which use a different third-party software with 2 steps to transform into an image, versus zeros and ones, which you add 4 steps to transform into an image. Totally incoherent and a very disingenuous argument.
Okay. That's fair. But there's still a concern of, let's say, reputational risk. So a lot of people, organizations, even nation states might stay away from Bitcoin. See, Bitcoin already has a very sort of weird image outside of this small circle of like podcasters and tech people or whatever. People think Bitcoin is a spam, it's for criminals. And if something like child pornography propagates on the blockchain, that image is going to get worse, which is going to hinder adoption. What is your like take on that? Do you care? Should we care?
I mean, there's already full child pornography on Bitcoin right now. So if you run a full validating node, you have child pornography on your machine.
And is that a problem according to you?
It's terrible. I hate it. However, this is the beauty of Bitcoin in that I can also have transactions and make transactions that I can be put in prison for and that I cannot make in any other capacity. And so this is the neutrality of Bitcoin. It's a double-edged sword. It's the beauty and the evil of it. And so I will also point out, who the fuck's problem is it that we talk about this? Because the whole reason we're talking about this is because about a year ago, Matthew Crater and Luke and Mechanic and their ilk thrust it into the forefront of the conversation. And they bring it up every time. They label anyone who opposes them as supporting these things. And so, because we weren't talking about it before, now we are. And so if I would believe them, I would believe those actually their point, if they're willing to reorg back to like early 2023 when child porn was being posted on Bitcoin. So unfortunately, they don't want to do that. So I really doubt their actual conviction. Because like there were like less like direct versions of that posts on Bitcoin, like links to like torrent sites or like CSAM like text stuff being put on Bitcoin over the years. But the first that I'm aware of like actual full like CSAM was in spring of 2023. And that really, for some reason, hasn't been like an issue with them. They're totally fine having that on their nodes unless they run a prune node, which many of the lead folks now do, but they didn't before. And so maybe their argument is that you want to prevent more of it, but the only people I see like talking about this are the people who are pro 110 and pro fork. And then also their fork doesn't prevent CSAM on their chain. So does like what's the actual point? Because the point, like someone who wanted to could do that on their chain, and there's nothing stopping them. And they could do it, and I mean, do they actually care about that? I'm pretty certain that they have manufactured this delusion for themselves, and in the face of reality of what you can do, which is technically possible on Bitcoin and soon to be a fork of Bitcoin, their reasoning runs into a brick wall that they cannot prevent these things from being posted. This is a basic tenet of information theory, and whenever you're able to, so basically, in order to prevent this, you would have to make it so that Bitcoin either has a centralized arbiter of transaction content, or you'd have to reduce the ability for arbitrary UTXOs being sent to arbitrary recipients. So you basically have to reduce the arbitrary construction of transactions. That is the only way you reduce arbitrary content, because as long as there's any level of arbitrary sender and recipient, there is the ability to put in arbitrary data. So that is the structural problem of the entire system. And that is also the whole reason it works.
Would you be in favor of a change that comes in the future that prevents the ability to just add any kind of arbitrary content, as you said, on the blockchain, so that actually solves the spam problem instead of just breaking it up?
That, it's kind of like asking, would I be in favor of solving world hunger? And I'd be like, yeah, but you can't do that. People who tell you that you can are wrong, and they're either lying or delusional. Also, I struggle to see how spam as the 110 camp defines it is a problem. The entire definition of what is spam is also very ambiguous and a moving target. Because I believe you really can't define it. So I take an absolutist stance that if it's on Bitcoin, it's not spam. Simply because it pays for block space. So I'll that's how I begin my line of reasoning. However, because most people's brains break and they are unable to have a conversation after me saying such a thing, I adopt the nomenclature and the semantics that they demand I do. And so if we were able to ban JPEGs, that'd be great. I think there are probably 100 to 1,000 more things that would vastly benefit Bitcoin rather than reducing those, because as I struggle to actually see what the problem is with those. I think the presuppositions of why these are bad are still very, very weak presuppositions. Because all the arguments against why they're bad are also functionally the same arguments as why Bitcoin itself is bad. It makes it hard to run a node. Well, then what do you do when the nodes are full, the blocks are full of normal transactions? It's worse. So your argument is actually against Bitcoin itself. I would love to identify what a way to solve world hunger, if we could even agree on what that definition means.
It's interesting. So I'm not technically qualified to have a debate on this, but what you've said about node requirements, right? That BIP-110 is actually going to increase node requirements because the same block space, when filled with transactions, requires more computation compared to that block space filled with arbitrary data, which you said that nodes don't have to validate. I've been told the opposite thing. I've been told that when you have this arbitrary data in the block space in blocks, that increases the time and the computation it needs for blocks to get verified.
Yeah, they're wrong. They're manufacturing and framing it in a very, very misleading way. In two scenarios where we have blocks which are full to the consensus limit of 4 million weight units, which is functionally 4 megabytes. If you have one block which is where the witness data is the majority of it, in which the JPEGs exist, your node does not have to run validation as intensely over those types of transactions. So a significant chunk of the block is not something your CPU on your node has to chug through. In a block where you have all of the available block space, all of the available weight of the block being filled with monetary transactions, your node will have to perform more computation on that. The argument that those other people are making are saying that there will just when you're able to imagine you can hand wave and no more JPEGs, then the blocks will just be smaller in general. So there will be less information total. However, an assumption of Bitcoin is that block space eventually becomes fully in demand, and that fees in some future drive the revenue of Bitcoin, and are like the block and are the primary revenue for the security budget of Bitcoin. And so in that scenario, we should assume that at some future date blocks are full. And if your argument is, so if you believe this general idea, and then you say, but then you say it is better that those blocks are full to the brim of monetary transactions, and then you say it is the reason that inscriptions or JPEGs are bad is because they make it hard to run a node. You have a functionally broken argument, because now you have an issue with IB or initial block download. And ironically, this actually gets into a Bcacher and small block argument, in that we argued about block IBD and block validation times and the scalability of hardware. And this is weirdly enough the 110ers haven't realized that this is an argument they've got, but this is kind of directionally the same argument. It usually takes 6 months to a couple of years for these things to filter into the filter 110 argument, into the 110 discourse and understanding. But when people say that it's harder to validate a node, they're talking about the reality. They would say their argument is hypothetically all those transactions are gone. They're not thinking in the future, when blocks are full anyway, of their glorious, perfect, pristine monetary transactions. The argument is incoherent in this case. And I also just think that this angle that IBD, the time to sync a node initially, as being this thing which has a very clear objective optimal time to it, is pretty ridiculous, because most filterers have a structural skill issue with running a node. They're having to buy third-party node software, or when they're running it, they're trying to sync it to an external SSD, which is totally fucking retarded. And they're like, why is my node taking so long? It's because you're a fucking useless piece of shit. The ordinals people figured this out years ago. The ordinals people already knew how to optimally run nodes years ago, because they're technically much more sophisticated than your average Bitcoin maximalist. And so this idea that IBD needs to be 72 hours as an absolute cap is kind of ambiguous. Are we really arguing about how long it should take to sync an archival node? So who's in charge of that? Where's the studies? Where is this a part of the conversation? No, it's this ambiguous moving target based upon a functionally illiterate understanding of hardware. And after that, then what? You've got de minimis bandwidth requirements. Show me actual large scale demonstration that people are not able to run nodes outside of some fucking retarded ass Bitcoin maxi in some backwater country that has a Raspberry Pi 2 that took a week or two to do this. Are you saying that adding an extra $100 onto your storage, for your storage requirements for a node every decade, is a thing that breaks Bitcoin? Because if it is, we are fucked. So this is this idea of taking time to validate different types of transactions is not only wrong, but based in an incoherent and poor understanding of hardware and IBD.
You mentioned at some point that there are cheaper ways to insert transactions, arbitrary data transactions, in BIP-110. What are the cheaper ways, and why can't those transactions be inserted in the blockchain as it is today?
Well, just because the people aren't using them on Bitcoin today. There's cheaper ways to do inscriptions today on Bitcoin. They're just not the predominant type. They're not the predominant strategy, just because the ordinals ecosystem has rallied around this convention. But there are cheaper ways of embedding data, and they're specifically what they are. I don't have a list. I can probably pull up some examples. They're related to manipulating witness data in different creative ways, is the short version. It's like really like top tier obscure developership. But the thing is, if someone builds those things and distributes those techniques to the broader ecosystem and it's adopted, then it doesn't matter. So it's and then Casey is very clear that out of spite, he will, if 110 fork does in fact work, and they are able to accrue meaningful hash rate and have meaningful, like reliable block delivery to the chain, then a lot of us who will all of a sudden have a bunch of extra Bitcoin or fake Bitcoin on this bullshit sidechain or this bullshit fork, I'll sell some of it, pocket some money for the time and all the death threats I received over the past 3 years, and the rest I will use to terrorize your bullshit fork of Bitcoin, demonstrating empirically what we have already argued conceptually over the past several years, because the forkers do not understand arguments. They only understand being slapped in the face with empirical reality. So, yeah.
Yeah. So this is something that even I feel pretty convinced about, that this is going to be a whack-a-mole. You shut down one way and then people will find some other creative means to do it. And then you will eventually hit a point where if you really want to stop arbitrary data, contiguous arbitrary data at least, you will have to limit some current functionality of the blockchain, because that's how much you'll go down to, like compressing
Correct.
sizes. But one argument again that Hunter Beach presented was regarding poison block attacks. What's your take on that?
I'm also really concerned. So we share this view. I'm really concerned. I think that Bitcoin and Bitcoin developers have been pretty in denial about this attack vector for a long time. Learning about this and discovering this, I will take a little credit in that the reason people know about this is pretty much because I platformed the right people, did the right podcast, did the right technical presentations at our conference. I'm concerned about this. I think that a lot of the Bitcoin core folks were blind to this for a long time and in denial. Again, they have kind of a cloistered technocracy generally. I love a lot of them, but they're so frustrating when it comes to self-reflection. And awareness of they're in this insular culture they've built. I'm concerned about poison blocks. 110 would prevent a few of the damaging types of poison blocks. It doesn't prevent all of them. So I share his view there. The irony, for a little bit of history, is that Portland HODL, as a bit of an olive branch to the fork crowd in September of 25, threw up a PR which basically limited the output size of something, but and it would be we're gonna meet in the middle here. You guys get one bullshit way of limiting contiguous arbitrary data, which is functionally ineffective, at actually preventing anything. But we also get a soft fork where we solve some of the most damaging poison blocks, DOS blocks, poison blocks. And out of that PR, Luke 10 comments down is well, we could just do this by limiting all this stuff. Anyway, that comment that the account Dathon Chris Gita spun up a week or two later said, okay, now that Luke's proposal is totally unopposed, here's the PR, which is very out of convention for the space. So it was again it has originations in disingenuous conduct on the mailing list. As far as preventing DOS blocks, 110 could prevent a few of the DOS blocks. Do I think that the price to pay for limiting some DOS blocks is to cede to a totally fucking cucked version of Bitcoin? No. Especially not when BIP-54 has over half of the blocks on Bitcoin running BIP-54 compliant stuff. This is already going to happen on Bitcoin main chain. It already has half of the half of the block producers already armored against we can intuit that they are going to activate BIP-54, which is what it's 5, 10. It's like 15 or 20 times more support from Bitcoin from Bitcoin block producers than the entirety of hash rate signaling for 110. So like this is already, that's a more comprehensive solution as well, and that's already like happening on Bitcoin today. It's just not part of the main narrative. So like I get what he's trying to do. Hunter has a bit of an accelerationist view on the like how to solve this. I just think that you're spinning your wheels a lot because 110 has no support, no ecosystem support, and will die on the vine shortly after the flag day.
So you did mention that Core has been sort of asleep on the steering wheel, right? Like they've known about poison block attacks, but they've not done enough or much or in time. So, and there is a bit of a culture around the technocracy and everything. And the BIP-110 movement, if I may call it that, has evolved into something of a critique of Core, not just about spam, not just about poison blocks in particular, but just a general critique of how Core operates. How much do you sympathize with that?
Oh, this is a doozy. So I've long been a Bitcoin Core critic. Been very frustrated with this insular, as I call it, technocracy. And this was like this is what the Taproot Wizards are trying to do. It's functionally like the Taproot Wizards were functionally a critique of Core, and their and this soft power structure within the Core organization, which has prevented or like dragged their feet on any kind of like progressive upgrade to Bitcoin. And so specifically the Taproot Wizards chose OpCat. And so what's funny is because the Taproot Wizards more or less failed in their goal to like try to institute this soft fork and try to jumpstart this soft fork apparatus. Udi Wertheimer supports the 110 fork, as do I, because I think that the only way to like demonstrate to move things forward is to be pro fork. Also, I want money for all my time, so I would like I'd like them to give me an airdrop so I can sell it. So the problem with the 110 critique of Core is that one, it's vastly conspiratorial. So they're not good critiques. They're very conspiratorial. That actually encapsulates most of it. It's very conspiratorial. And then because 110 is a structurally incoherent fork and movement, it makes Bitcoin Core look really, really good. So everybody with their head screwed on straight who may have like been open to a good critique of Core now finds themselves aligning with it. For example, like I'm branded as being pro Core, and many people are, and it's because Core has made some minor, intuitive, obvious changes and actually done something pretty incredible, which is weather an extremely harsh social attack. And so it makes me appreciate the fact that even though the soft forks that are near and dear to my heart are being like stonewalled, at least Core hasn't ceded ground to a delusional, reactionary, anti-freedom movement. So in a way, they're like mostly pro-ossification, or and like insular culture has shown to be an incredible strength. And so it's ironic because 110 has only strengthened Core by making them look incredibly sane and incredibly noble, because they've handled this with grace and poise, and with patience and with procedure, and it has made me kind of come around to appreciate Bitcoin Core as being a very, very like steady guiding hand, because I think about all the terrible ways Bitcoin could have been hamstrung or destroyed or co-opted over the years. And I'm glad like 110 is just like a modern day example of why Core is like such a trusted project, because they managed to like deflect these like anti-freedom movements.
I find that very interesting. So I've
Yeah.
heard something along those lines from other people in the Indian Bitcoin community. And I think like because as Bitcoiners, we're all like anti-establishment, right? So that also stays with us when we are inside Bitcoin, and Core feels like the establishment. So there's a natural tendency to be like suspicious and critical and skeptical of their motivations. But I see what you mean here. And it seems obvious that you believe that BIP-110 is not going to succeed, that this is, if they stick with it, this is going to result in a chain split. So we're going to all end up with 2 coins. So do you have any advice, any practical advice for plebs who are listening to this on what to do before, during, and after this whole period from like August 8th to September 1st?
So I think the average person doesn't have to do anything. You don't even have to worry about like not sending your coins. You don't have to worry about like preparing for it. All functionally, all of the economic activity on Bitcoin will have no idea if you use any kind of centralized exchange or any kind of wallet that isn't one of like the 3 or 4 like different companies who are pro 110. You don't have to do anything. A lot of people say like, oh, you've got to like not transact for a few weeks. That's bullshit. I mean, I would love for 110 to get a few blocks so I could sell my coins. I don't have anywhere I can sell my coins. There's like a couple bullshit vibe coded like JavaScript websites to like swap coins with no volume. Like what, like the prediction markets have like 500,000. I would love to sell several Bitcoin of like the 110 chain. There will not be enough volume for me alone to sell my like 110 Bitcoin. Even if they do manage to get blocks in any kind of reliable manner. So almost pretty much every person, even people listening to this who do not run a NOTS node, as long as you are not running a NOTS node, you don't have to do anything. There will be people who say, you've got to be concerned about replay attacks, which you do. Portland HODL is going to replay all your transactions on 110 on real Bitcoin, whether you like it or not. And if he doesn't, then other people will do out of spite for your foolishness. And then some people say like, I mean, actually, I'll say this. The one thing you could do, if you're using a third-party custodian where you don't hold the keys to your coins, get your stuff off that custodian and into self-custody, because on the very, very like slight chance that you might be able to sell your 110 coins, you should immediately take the chance to do that, because the custodians will not honor this. They don't even know what's happening. And you're missing out on a free airdrop, basically.
Correct. You have to be on the blockchain before the split happens for you to get 2 copies of the same coin. Yeah. Fair.
Yeah.
So I want to get into the 2 closing sections here. Do you have 5 more minutes?
Yeah. I got 5 or 10. We're good.
Okay. So this is a question I ask all my guests. Imagine it's the year 2059, 50 years since the Genesis block, and Bitcoin is dead. No one uses it. No one talks about it. Looking back from that time, what were the most fateful decisions that the Bitcoin community made that caused this to happen?
I really like that question. This is something I worry about. In the modern era of Bitcoin, like the podcast era, like kicking off with the Murad Pomp podcast in like late 2018. That's when like the modern like Bitcoin maxi narratives kicked off. A lot of these narratives, we began to codify this idea that Bitcoin is somehow like predestined or like chosen by God. And we got really, really good at rejecting FUD. We got really, really good at rejecting critiques of Bitcoin. But it doesn't mean that we're actually aware to those critiques. I for a while now, maybe I'm biased. I feel like the wind is changing, but it feels like a lot of people fully outright like hand wave and say, this problem of declining transaction activity and declining transaction fees is not an issue because we'll just magically accrue transactions on Bitcoin. It feels like some people are kind of coming around to like being a little worried about this today. But like that would be one example of things we basically got really good at making up like a fanfic, like these narratives which are not necessarily true, that Bitcoin is somehow like chosen by God to succeed. And that's really not the case. And a lot of the people who were instrumental in defining those narratives did the 10,000 hours studying Bitcoin, but most of what they were doing is just making up fantasy about what Bitcoin is and not understanding how Bitcoin actually functions, which is one of the reasons why all the podcasters are like functionally technically illiterate. They're all like, well, you got to argue philosophy with me and you got to argue like economics with me. No, fuck that. Like this is a technical discussion and like all the technical people already understand all your bullshit made up philosophy. Like you have to understand the technical side. So we saw a lot of that. And because of that, a lot of the forefront of like the Bitcoin mind share got basically wasted on useless circular, I apologize for using the term here, circular dialectic on like what Bitcoin is. Now I love me some good Hegelian dialectic, but the thing is like a lot of this serves to be very like onanistic, very self-pleasuring, and it's like and already like reinforcing on what you already believe. And unfortunately, I think that following the block size war, which was really basically a gut punch and a decimation of the technical optimism in the developer community of Bitcoin, that taking the hegemony of like what Bitcoin is for half a decade has been instrumental in gutting a lot of the like technical progress that was being done on Bitcoin. I don't know if that's if in 2059 if Bitcoin is like failing or has failed by then, if that will be a reason. I think we can look back at the past 5 years, really post block size war, as a moment where Bitcoin changed a lot, and it changed to one of like the pleb investor, and where similar to like the email protocol, as Jameson Lopp describes, we could have been improving it, but because we did not, and because it ossified, is now captured by permissioned intermediaries. And I think that Bitcoin in such a scenario, in such a scenario will probably be functionally permissioned by intermediaries or not exist at all. So I also think that we tend to deify Bitcoin itself a bit and think that Satoshi designed a perfect system, and Satoshi did not design a perfect system. Satoshi designed an incredibly revolutionary system that like it's kind of miraculous and path dependent how it worked. It's like kind of amazing it still works today. Amazing that it's hit $2 trillion in market cap, now 1 trillion, but whatever. Like a lot of people think that this is this God-breathed network, and it's not. This is the creation of a human or humans and maintained by humans, and due to human organizational friction and like our inability to know what happens in the future and coordinate around that, is just an unknowable scenario. So I think the less agile Bitcoin gets, the greater risk it has long term. I think that if Bitcoin is done today, like done as a network today, then we will be dead in 2059. So I think that being agile and able to respond to changes in technology and markets and stuff is a very important ingredient to succeeding in the great Bitcoin experiment long term. So yeah. So I don't really answer your question, but I kind of like riffed on it.
No. I love this. This is why I started this podcast, because every podcast I listen to, and I had a phase where that was pleasuring in some way, listening to people telling me.
Dude, me too. I loved, oh my God. I felt like I was becoming enlightened in like 2019, 2020, because like for me, Bitcoin was this like really weird impersonal thing. It was like on message boards on like Reddit and Bitcoin Talk back in the day. I didn't know anybody in like real life. I'd started a Bitcoin meetup with like nobody coming and like it. And then in like 2019, 2020, it like really exploded in the West in like the average person. And so and we began to manufacture this narrative about what it is together. And so that was like really, really exciting. The problem is just like most of that is simply just like is made up. It may like be directionally true on many things, but those is like the anchor of objective things of what Bitcoin is, has, I think, done a lot of harm to Bitcoin's culture and understanding.
Yeah. So it's time for a very quick lightning round. I'm going to fire a few questions at you, and you need to tell me the first thing that comes to mind.
Okay.
Are you game?
Yeah, I'm down.
Yeah. Yay or nay? BIP-110.
Nay.
4-year cycle.
Yay. I don't know. I'm a fatalist about this. I always think it's not going to happen, but it always does.
Power law.
I'm not really familiar with the power law. I kind of gave up trying to model Bitcoin's price behavior years ago. So, yeah. Maybe I'm right in the middle. Power law, I'm neither.
Quantum threat.
I'm agnostic. So I'm just gonna say yay, because I think we should aggressively address this.
The Lightning Network.
I love Lightning. Yay. Disappointed by it, but I love Lightning.
Your most controversial Bitcoin take.
Mine used to be like the fee concern. But it feels like that's kind of now a lot of people are worrying about that. I have to come up with a better one. I'll probably take I don't know if this is controversial. A controversial view I have is I think Bitcoin, we should seek to make Bitcoin used for legal purposes. Yeah, so I think Bitcoin should be used to sell. I think it should be used to hide from governments and pay. Yeah, I think so that's my view. Because I think if it can't do those things, then it can't also survive government restrictions. It can't survive capital controls. It ceases to become a free network. We see this with money. Bitcoin has to remain a free, neutral network. It cannot care what it's being used for. So,
a Bitcoiner you disagree with but still respect.
Adam Back. I'm in like a group chat with him and we talk all the time, and I just like always frustrated with him, but I respect him so much. He's been in the game for forever, and he still just like gets down and dirty with all the plebs. Maybe another one would be probably Antoine Ponceau. He's a Bitcoin core contributor. I respect him a ton. He's French. He's leading BIP-54. He is. I'm sorry, Antoine, if you hear this. I think he's really condescending to people, to developers like Jeremy Rubin, who want to like do CTV type stuff. But I love Antoine and respect him so much because he's doing the work. He's really smart, and he believes he's doing what's best for Bitcoin. So yeah.
The dumbest thing you believed about Bitcoin?
I'm gonna reveal myself. I didn't really understand. Oh my god, I feel someone's gonna listen to this and like invalidate everything I said. I didn't really understand what UTXOs were for like until like 2017 or 2018, frankly, for like well over half a decade. Like I didn't know what they were. I didn't really know how Bitcoin worked at a functional level. The block size war did a number on me. I had to like understand how this shit worked. Then it honestly took me a few more years to kind of really get my technical feet under me about like how Bitcoin itself works. So yeah, I don't know if that's like the dumbest thing I believe, just like I'm embarrassed how little I understood. And that's fine.
I still am embarrassed by how little I understand on the technical side of Bitcoin.
Totally. It took me probably a decade before I really got into the technical side of Bitcoin. So
yeah,
but there were not like good resources there was just like not as much like information and like as like digestible. And then I also was mainly focused on mining, which is like a non-technical enterprise. So you don't need to know about how Bitcoin works. You just like hook up to a Stratum address, and it's basically business development. The rest of it. So, yeah.
Okay. Your favorite Bitcoin price analyst?
It's got to be Checkmatey. Probably a cop-out answer. I liked him back when he was like what is it? There's some other like cryptocurrency like DigiCash or something, which was like it was not DigiCash, something like that. But I kind of liked him because he was really good at that too. But he's probably my favorite Bitcoin price analyst because he's not just a price analyst. He's just one of the best like commentators in general on Bitcoin, in addition to price analysts. And he's made a lot of money too. Like his product is kicking off, and I've watched him do it. And he kind of like defined the era of the on-chain like analyst run in like 21 and 22, because like that was a special time, is looking at Bitcoin as an on-chain analysis standpoint. So yeah,
Checkmate is my favorite too. Yeah. Who's your favorite Bitcoiner?
Yeah, maybe Andreas Antonopoulos. He's the guy who got me into Bitcoin, and he's always been pretty. He's been very heterodox, and I appreciate a heterodox mindset. And he's always been very, very like intellectually curious, and I like that he's culturally doesn't fit with Bitcoin. Like Bitcoin kind of turned into this like all these other things like meat and government and other stuff, and he's been like this kind of weirdo progressive guy for a long time. So I always liked Andreas because he was like everybody's first like real breakout Bitcoin interlocutor.
Yeah, he's a good one. My favorite is Peter McCormack of What Bitcoin Did.
Oh, I love Peter. Peter actually came into. Peter brought a documentary team to some of my Bitcoin mining sites here in Oklahoma. If you watch, you can see I look a little bit different. If you watch the Dear Elizabeth Warren series, he comes out to some of my wells and some Bitcoin mines, and yeah. So I got to meet him. I got his number. I love Peter. He pretends to be dumb, and he is kind of dumb, but like it doesn't matter. He's a good interviewer. He's like a good person.
Yeah. I also got to meet him in BTC Prague 2023, but only briefly.
Yeah.
So, yes or no? Have you seen the absolute bottom in Bitcoin price?
Yeah, it's so boring.
Give me a number. How high is Bitcoin going in the next bull run?
Easily $250,000. That's pretty obvious.
Give me a year. When does Bitcoin hit $1 million?
2031.
That's pretty optimistic. So if you weren't in Bitcoin, what would you be doing?
I spent a decade in oil and gas market research. I'd probably be doing market research in some capacity. I've owned other unrelated businesses, brick and mortar, like high-end vintage resale. My wife and I put together and sold an esports team way back in the day. if I could choose what I want to do, my dream job would be, if I had the time, to run one of these video game like server community businesses where you basically host like special servers on different video games and people pay for it. And yeah, that's like, I would love
Yeah,
that.
you could have done many things, but you're picking that.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. This was it. This was the lightning round. This has been amazing, Charlie.
Yeah, thanks for letting me ramble. Appreciate this. And disclaimer, I probably said some incorrect things, and for people that I pissed off, that's fine. I don't really care anymore. And I sometimes decide to participate in the debate. Sometimes I don't want to talk about it. So it just depends on the day. So I do enjoy your podcast. And I'm so glad you had Tatum on. He's my boy. Tatum, my DJ at a party a year or two ago. It was really, really fun. So.
Wait, you've been listening to my podcast since before Hunter introduced us or after?
Well, I was aware of it because I like the name.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I was doing I was like maybe a year ago, I was like researching like what are the podcasts which seem interesting. I don't like listen to it, but I'll like check up on who. I have a little script running that says who have been guests on podcasts. And so I just kind of like note if there's been interesting guests or who's like going on a podcast circuit. Because I like to try to monitor the situation, you know? So, yeah.
No, I'm flattered. I'm already flattered even by that. So where can people go to find more of your work?
The direct voice for me is Twitter at CB Spears. I mostly just talk about like data centers now, unfortunately, and AI. I used to write a ton for our newsletter. So I do a lot of like reporting and writing for blockspace.media. It's the media company we have. But right now I'm not as verbose I'm not as prolific in writing. You can just watch the live stream now at noon Central or 1 p.m. Eastern every day. I go live with my co-host Colin, and we cover data centers, AI, honestly, boring stuff. Like not as much Bitcoin anymore, but it's where all the money is. So yeah.
Gotta own the dough, man. That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. This has been really fun, Charlie. I genuinely mean this. I said this after Tatum's episode as well. I genuinely enjoy the conversation.
Yeah.
So you're a fun person.
Thank you. I like to hang out in person way more. I don't like to get in arguments on the internet. I like to argue against ambiguous people, and I'm not a confrontational person in person, but I am whenever I get a soapbox. So thank you so much for letting me do this. So yeah. Cheers.